My fiance, Wayne Garner, has a rare condition called hyperempathy syndrome. Yet somehow, I'm the only person he cannot empathize with. When I develop acute gastroenteritis and the cramps become unbearable, I force myself to call Wayne and beg him to take me to the hospital. After listening to me, Wayne simply says, "Andrea has a slight cold. I have to take her to the hospital first. Hang in there." I remember during our first family dinner, Andrea Graham calls him and says she's feeling down, and he rushes off to be with her. I instantly tell him we should break up, but he grabs my hand and keeps promising it will never happen again. After that, he does keep his promise and stops responding to Andrea's requests for help. I secretly rejoice, believing that staying by his side long enough will eventually correct his misplaced empathy. But now, the same thing happens all over again. The pain in my abdomen keeps getting worse, leaving me with no choice but to dial the emergency number with trembling hands. While I'm in the ambulance, an Instagram notification pops up. Andrea has posted a photo of herself with Wayne at the hospital. The caption reads, "It's only a minor cold, yet someone still takes the time to bring me to the hospital. It feels so nice to be someone's top priority." Another wave of sharp cramps passes. I look at the job offer from Whirler in my inbox and accept it. "Wayne, I'm really leaving you this time." The ambulance sped into the hospital with its siren blaring. The nurse examined me quickly, murmuring to the doctor beside her in a grave tone. My acute gastroenteritis had progressed to a perforation. If I had arrived 30 minutes later, the infection in my abdomen would have been enough to kill me. I gripped the bedsheet beneath me as Wayne Garner's careless words echoed in my mind. I had called him when I was in so much pain that I was about to lose consciousness. Yet all he cared about was another woman's mild cold. As the nurse wheeled me toward the emergency operating room, I spotted two familiar figures around the corner. Wayne held Andrea Graham's hand in one hand and carried a bag of cold medicine with the other. He lowered his head and patiently listened as she quietly complained about how crowded the hospital was. Andrea was an underprivileged student whom he had been supporting. The instant Wayne and I locked eyes, his entire body stiffened, and panic flashed across his face. I saw him instinctively let go of Andrea's hand and take half a step forward. But then he stopped. He turned and patted Andrea's arm to comfort her. In the end, he never walked over to me. Andrea followed his gaze to look at me, and a trace of triumph crossed her eyes. She deliberately leaned even closer to Wayne. I looked away from Wayne, letting the nurse wheel me down the hallway. The moment I entered the operating room, the tears I had held back for so long finally slipped silently onto my clothes. A dull pain from the surgery came in waves, but I didn't shed another tear. Ever since the first time he abandoned me for Andrea, a crack had formed in my heart. Today, my heart finally shattered beyond repair. After the surgery ended, I was placed in a private room. Not long after, the door to my room was gently pushed open. Wayne walked in with a trace of guilt on his face. He pulled a chair over and sat beside my bed, reaching out to touch my forehead, but I instinctively turned my head away. His hand froze in midair, and his voice softened. "Andrea just got here, and has no one to rely on. I didn't think your condition would be this serious. I'm sorry I neglected you today." Neglected? What a light word that was. I forced a faint smile. The movement pulled at my incision, and the pain made me inhale sharply. All that was left inside me was nothing but disgust. My voice was weak, but unusually firm. "Wayne, let's break up." His face darkened instantly, and he began to guilt-trip me with the same old lines. "I already apologized. Do you really have to keep holding on to it? I was just taking care of a friend. Why do you have to be so petty? Can't you be a little more understanding?" I stared at the ceiling, listing every empty promise he had ever made, word for word. "At that dinner, you left me to be with Andrea. Back then, you held my hand and told me it would be the last time. Since then, every time she came to you with some minor issue, you'd come back and make a bunch of promises to me. You said I was the only one in your heart, and that you knew what mattered most. But what about today? Wayne, your promises mean absolutely nothing." He still wanted to argue. A sharp pain suddenly shot through my abdominal incision, and I curled up in agony. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him anymore. I simply closed my eyes and stopped responding to anything he said. When Wayne saw that I had stopped arguing, he assumed I had relented and forgiven him. The tension on his face eased a little, and he sat by my bed, going on and on about how he would make it up to me once I was discharged. My heart went cold, and I quietly made up my mind. Once my wound healed and I was discharged, I would leave for Whirler right away. I would leave this city full of disappointment for good and leave Wayne behind. Before long, Wayne's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen, his eyes softening. He stood up and gave me a casual excuse. "Something urgent came up at the office. I need to step out for a bit. I'll be back soon." I knew without even looking that the message was from Andrea. Perhaps she thought he had stayed with me for too long, or perhaps she wanted him to bring her something. In the past, I would have grabbed him and demanded an explanation. But now, I didn't even have the strength to look up. I just gave a flat hum in response. Seeing that I made no attempt to stop him, Wayne turned and left, clearly relieved. He gently closed the door, afraid of disturbing me. But that thoughtfulness came far too late and seemed insincere. I didn't know how much time had passed before the door was gently pushed open again. Wayne walked in, carrying an insulated food container printed with the logo of a popular dessert shop. There was a trace of forced tenderness in his expression. He set the container on the nightstand and pulled up a chair to sit down. I went out of my way to buy you some warm oatmeal. It's fresh off the stove. Eat some while it's still hot. It's good for your recovery after surgery. He took off the lid, and the aroma of the oatmeal drifted out, yet I immediately caught the familiar sweet scent of honey. That was something I had been allergic to since birth. I stiffened. My stomach churned, and my incision throbbed along with it. Is there honey in this? Don't you know I'm allergic? Wayne froze for a moment, then hurriedly scooped up a spoonful of oatmeal to inspect it closely. He said in a casual tone, Andrea ordered 2 portions earlier. She has a small appetite and couldn't finish them. This one was portioned out separately and wasn't touched. The waiter probably mixed them up while packing everything. The honey was only in her serving. It didn't get into yours. It's fine. So he had been gone for so long just to accompany Andrea for a meal. This oatmeal, which was supposedly meant to nourish my body, was nothing more than the portion she couldn't finish. I curled my pale lips into a faint smile. Are you bringing me her leftovers? Wayne frowned, a touch of impatience creeping into his tone. How can you say that? The oatmeal was completely untouched. Throwing it away would just be wasting food. I brought this over especially for you. I was thinking of you the whole time. Yet you're nitpicking over such a trivial matter. Andrea just has a small appetite and couldn't finish it. It's not like it's chewed up leftovers. Can you stop being so sensitive? Every word out of his mouth excused Andrea, while accusing me of making a big deal out of nothing. I lay on the hospital bed, having nearly lost my life. Yet in his eyes, it was merely me being petty and refusing to show understanding toward his friend. I dug my nails deep into my palms. The physical pain couldn't compare to even a fraction of the deep despair in my chest. Just as I opened my mouth to argue, the wooden door of the room was suddenly shoved open. Andrea stood at the doorway carrying a beautiful fruit basket. Her eyes were red, and she wore the fragile expression of someone who had been greatly wronged. Her gaze fell on the container on the table, and she let out a soft laugh. Her tone was openly provocative. Wayne, no wonder a portion of oatmeal was missing when the waiter packed our food earlier. So you brought it to Edith. I took 2 bites of that oatmeal and really couldn't eat another bite, so I had the waiter pack it up. I didn't expect it would still get mixed up. If I had known it would upset Edith, I would have just thrown it away. Her words hit me like a heavy blow. The oatmeal Wayne had confidently claimed was untouched was nothing but Andrea's leftovers. Wayne's face instantly turned bright red. He was so flustered that he didn't know what to do and couldn't even look me in the eye. He turned to comfort Andrea first, reaching out to pat her arm gently. It's windy outside. Why did you come all the way here? Andrea lowered her eyes, her voice soft and plaintive. I was worried that you and Edith would argue, so I came over to check. If I had known that bowl of leftover oatmeal would upset Edith, I would have just thrown it away. It's my fault for causing her trouble. All the resentment, pain, and disappointment I had bottled up for so long exploded at that moment. I no longer wanted to keep giving in. For the first time, I straightened my back and fired back at her without hesitation. Andrea, if you really felt sorry, you wouldn't have come all the way to my hospital room to tell me to my face that the oatmeal was your leftovers. You knew I just had surgery for gastroenteritis and that I was allergic to honey, yet you still let Wayne bring me leftovers that contained honey. Who exactly is causing trouble on purpose? My voice wasn't loud, but every word came out crystal clear, and I didn't back down in the slightest. Andrea never expected that I, who had always been gentle and yielding, would stand up to her. She froze for a few seconds. The next moment, her eyes quickly filled with tears, and her shoulders trembled slightly. She hid behind Wayne as if she were the victim, clutching his sleeve tightly, and began sobbing quietly. When Wayne saw her crying, his face instantly turned frighteningly grim. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of disappointment and blame. Edith Trevino, do you have to speak so harshly? He demanded. Andrea kindly went out of her way to visit you, but you were so aggressive that you scared her to tears. Don't you have even the slightest respect for other people? The incision on my abdomen throbbed in waves, and cold sweat ran down my forehead. She came here to provoke me. She deliberately showed up to reveal that the oatmeal was the portion she had left behind, clearly wanting to humiliate me. She was just joking. Do you really have to keep making such a big deal out of it? Wayne said. He gently patted Andrea's back, comforting her softly. When he turned to look at me, his voice became incredibly cold. Look at Andrea. You've scared her like this. Apologize. I stared at him blankly, unable to believe what I was hearing. I had nearly died from a perforation caused by acute gastroenteritis, and he showed no concern. But when Andrea deliberately came to humiliate me, he actually forced me to back down and apologize. I bit my lower lip. My eyes became misty, but I stubbornly refused to let the tears fall. I won't apologize. Seeing that I refused to give in, Wayne's expression turned cold. His tone carried an obvious threat, each word aimed at my greatest weakness. Edith, think carefully. You haven't worked for the past few years, and you don't have a single dollar in savings. Every medical bill and hospital expense for this surgery was paid with my card. If you refuse to apologize to Andrea today, I'll stop paying any of your treatment expenses starting right now. I'll also make you pay back every single dollar I've spent on you over the past few years. His few casual words cut off every escape route I had. I lay on the bed, unable to move. I still needed money for follow-up observation, wound care, and medication. Besides, my onboarding process for my new job in Warler hadn't been finalized yet. Without a single dollar to my name, I couldn't afford to stand up to him right now. Andrea hid behind him and secretly glanced at me, her eyes filled with unmistakable triumph. Despair spread through every part of my body. After a long moment, I closed my eyes and gave in, my voice almost inaudible. I'm sorry. Those words stripped away the last bit of my dignity. Hearing my apology, the hostility on Wayne's face vanished instantly. He turned to gently comfort Andrea. Then he casually picked up the insulated container and the fruit basket. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder and walked out of the room without looking back. The door closed behind them, shutting out the sound of their quiet laughter and conversation. I was left alone in the spacious private room. Turning onto my side, I buried my face in the pillow and cried silently. For the next 5 days, Wayne never once set foot into my room again. The caregiver came on schedule every day to change my dressing and bring my meals, occasionally chatting with me for a bit. Whenever I brought up Wayne, she simply shook her head and said she had never seen him come by. I didn't feel disappointed at all. Instead, I felt unusually at peace. From time to time, I checked Instagram and saw Andrea posting updates constantly. In one photo, Andrea and Wayne were walking through a street fair by the river. That was the very place we had planned to visit on New Year's Eve the year before. I had arranged it with him half a month in advance. However, at the last minute, he claimed he had to work late and left me waiting at home alone until after midnight. In another post, Wayne was bending down on an upscale shopping street to tie Andrea's shoelaces. I had once set my heart on a pair of flats and begged him again and again to go shopping with me. He complained that shopping was too much trouble, yet now he gladly spent the entire day shopping with Andrea. At a scenic restaurant, he patiently peeled shrimp for Andrea at the table. I had once reserved a table at that same restaurant for my birthday, but after getting a call from his assistant halfway through, he left me there by myself. In the past, I would have stared at those photos all night without sleeping. But now, those glaring displays of affection no longer bothered me in the slightest. While recovering over those few days, I completed all the necessary paperwork. I contacted the company in Warler, coordinated my onboarding and accommodation with them, and booked a direct flight to Warler for the day of my discharge. Seeing me handle everything on my own, the caregiver often urged me to contact Wayne out of concern. I simply shook my head calmly and told her there was no need. On the day I was discharged, the caregiver helped me pack my personal belongings, which only filled a small backpack. It contained my ID, my phone, and the onboarding documents for my new job. For years, I had depended on Wayne for everything. He paid for my food, clothes, and daily expenses. Now that I was leaving, I didn't want to take a single thing that belonged to him. I wanted to make a clean break and owe him nothing. The caregiver wheeled me to the hospital entrance. After thanking her and saying goodbye, I took a cab to the airport by myself. Meanwhile, Wayne was shopping with Andrea. Halfway through, she casually mentioned my hospital stay. Only then did he suddenly realize that he hadn't gone to see me in 5 days. Guilt washed over him. After comforting Andrea, he immediately drove to the hospital. When he pushed open the door to my room, it was completely empty. The bed had already been stripped and cleaned, and nothing that belonged to me remained. Panic surged through him instantly, and he pulled out his phone on instinct. He first opened up our chat, typed out a long message of apology, and hit send. A red exclamation mark immediately popped up on the screen. His fingers froze. Unwilling to give up, he called my number. The cold automated message played over and over on the other end. He called several times in a row, but each call ended the same way. An inexplicable panic gripped Wayne. He gripped his phone tightly, rushed to the doorway of the restroom, and stopped the caregiver who was wiping down the counter. His voice was frantic. "Where's the patient who was staying in that room? Where did she go?" Wiping the edge of the counter, the caregiver said flatly, "She was discharged this morning and went straight to the airport to catch a flight. Before she left, she told me that she never wanted to come back to this city again." Wayne's pupils shrank sharply. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She flew out. His heart sank. A fear he had never experienced before swept over him. Where did she go? Warler. She said she had already found a job there and planned to settle down for good, the caregiver answered. Wayne stood frozen. The job offer I had once shown him, which he had only glanced at carelessly, suddenly came rushing back into his mind. The airport terminal was choked with the dull hum of announcements and rolling luggage. Wayne sprinted through the sliding glass doors of Gate 3, his chest heaving, his tailored suit jacket soaked with sweat. He gripped the security railing, staring wildly at the glass corridor. "Sir, boarding for Flight 408 to Warler closed 15 minutes ago," the gate agent said, stepping back slightly at the sight of his disheveled appearance. "The aircraft has already pushed back from the tarmac." Wayne's breath caught in his throat. He pressed his palms against the thick glass. Out on the runway, a silver twin-engine jet was slowly taxiing toward the strip, its navigation lights blinking against the overcast gray sky. No, wait," Wayne stammered, pulling out his wallet with shaking hands. "Buy me a ticket. Put me on the next flight. Charter a private plane, anything. Just get me to Warler." "The next commercial flight isn't until tomorrow morning, sir," the agent replied politely, checking her terminal. "And private charters require 6 hours advance clearance." Wayne's hands dropped to his sides. His phone buzzed in his palm. He looked down, frantically hoping, praying. It was a text from Edith. It was Andrea. "Wayne, where are you? The driver brought me back to the apartment, but my ankle hurts again. Can you come up and help me apply the ointment?" For the first time in 3 years, the sight of Andrea's name on his screen did not trigger his usual instinct to comfort her. Instead, a wave of profound, suffocating nausea rushed up his throat. He didn't reply. He turned around and walked out of the terminal, his steps heavy, feeling as though the air inside his lungs had turned to lead. He drove straight back to the residential tower in the city center, the high-rise apartment he and Edith had shared for 4 years. He unlocked the front door and pushed it open. "Edith," he called out, automatically, his voice echoing off the quiet hardwood floors. Silence greeted him. The apartment was spotless, but it felt terrifyingly hollow. Wayne walked into the master bedroom and yanked open the walk-in closet doors. Half of the closet was completely bare. Edith's casual clothes, her worn canvas shoes, her old medical books from college all gone. But what caught Wayne's eye was the vanity table in the center of the room. Neatly laid out on the polished marble surface were dozens of velvet boxes and designer shopping bags. Every single piece of jewelry Wayne had ever bought her, every luxury handbag, every silk scarf, and every platinum watch were lined up in chronological order. Beside them lay a thick stack of unused credit cards he had given her over the years, accompanied by their original purchase receipts. Tucked beneath the cards was a small piece of paper. Wayne reached out, his hand trembling so violently he nearly knocked over a bottle of perfume. He picked up the paper. It was a formal bank transfer confirmation. Every penny Wayne had spent on her hospital stay 5 days ago had been wired back to his primary account, down to the last cent. She hadn't taken a single thing he owned. She hadn't even kept the clothes he bought her for her last birthday. She had stripped him out of her life with surgical precision, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding weight of his own money. Wayne fell to his knees on the hardwood floor, clutching the small piece of paper against his chest. A sharp, burning ache exploded behind his ribs. For years, he had proudly believed his hyperempathy syndrome made him a kinder, more profound man than others. A man who felt the pain of the weak, the lonely, and the underprivileged. He had convinced himself that Edith was strong, that she was resilient, that she didn't need the constant emotional soothing he gave to fragile girls like Andrea. He had taken her quiet patience for granted, treating her endurance as an excuse to neglect her. Now, sitting in the silence of their empty home, he realized the terrifying truth. Edith wasn't unfeeling. She had simply buried her pain so deeply to keep from burdening him that by the time he finally noticed, her love for him had already bled out. At 2 o'clock the following morning, Wayne stood in the office of Dr. Harrison, the chief of surgery at City Central Hospital. Dr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, looking at the pale, hollow-eyed man standing across his desk with an expression of cold, professional disgust. "You're her fiance?" Dr. Harrison asked, tossing Edith's medical file onto the desk. "You're the man who left her alone in the ER?" Wayne's hands tightened on the edge of the desk. I took care of her, Bill. I brought her food." "You brought her oatmeal with honey when she was 4 hours post-op from a emergency laparotomy." Dr. Harrison interrupted sharply, his voice rising in outrage. "Do you have any idea what happened to her on the night she was brought in?" Wayne swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. She had gastroenteritis. "It was a perforated acute gastroenteritis, Mr. Garner." Dr. Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. Her stomach lining had ruptured. Gastric acid and purulent fluid were leaking directly into her abdominal cavity. If the paramedics had arrived 10 minutes later, she would have gone into septic shock and died on the transport gurney. Wayne felt as if a heavy steel beam had struck him across the face. His vision Swam, the room tilting violently around him. Ruptured stomach lining. Septic shock. 10 minutes from death. He remembered her phone call 5 days ago. Her voice had been breathless. Faint. Practically a whisper as she pleaded with him to take her to the hospital. And what had he said? Andrea has a slight cold. I have to take her to the hospital first. Hang in. There. He had made a woman whose internal organs were tearing apart wait while he held the hand of a girl with a stuffy nose and a 37-degree fever. Dr. Harrison looked at Wayne's bloodless face and let out a harsh, bitter laugh. The nurse told me she didn't cry once during her 5 days of recovery. Not when they changed her abdominal drains, not when her incisions throbbed, not when she walked the corridors alone to stretch her muscles. She only cried once, on the night she came out of surgery, staring at her phone. The doctor picked up his pen, pointing it at the door. Get out of my office, Mr. Garner. Patients like Edith deserve better than a man who can't distinguish between a fatal emergency and a theatrical sniffle. Wayne stumbled out of the hospital into the freezing night air. He leaned against the brick wall of the ambulance bay, sliding down until he was kneeling on the wet asphalt. His hyperempathy syndrome, the curse that had plagued him since childhood, forcing him to physically feel the distress, fear, and sorrow of people around him, suddenly flared with agonizing intensity. For 3 years he had shielded himself from Edith's emotions, believing she was calm and self-sufficient. But now the suppressed memory of her faint, trembling voice over the phone echoed in his mind like a physical blow. He felt the phantom slice of a surgical scalpel across his abdomen. He felt the cold, metallic terror of an ambulance interior. He felt the suffocating, silent despair of lying in a white hospital room while the man who promised to protect her walked out the door with another woman. It wasn't an echo of empathy. It was guilt, raw and searing, tearing his soul to ribbons. He curled up on the cold pavement, dry heaving into the gutter, sobbing until his throat bled. Worler was a coastal city 1,200 miles north, known for its crisp autumn air, towering glass skyscrapers, and fast-paced tech industry. 6 months passed. Inside the glass-walled executive conference room of Worler Global Tech, Edith Trevino stood before a screen displaying a complex data analytics model. She wore a sharp, charcoal gray pantsuit, her long hair styled in a sleek ponytail. Her face was healthy, her cheeks flush with color, her posture erect and commanding. The predictive retention algorithm for the overseas market shows a 34% increase in efficiency once we integrate the new API, Edith said, her voice clear, confident, and ringing through the silent room. She clicked the pointer, bringing up the final financial projection. That concludes my proposal. The room erupted into applause. At the head of the long oak table, Julian Vance, the 32-year-old managing director of Worler Global, stood up and clapped smoothly. Julian was a tall, lean man with sharp, intelligent dark eyes and an easy, grounded presence. He walked over to Edith, holding out a hand. Brilliant work, Edith. The board approved the budget unanimously. You've accomplished more in 6 months than the previous director did in 3 years. Edith accepted his handshake, a genuine, warm smile spreading across her face. Thank you, Mr. Vance. It wouldn't have been possible without your team's full support. I told you 6 months ago when I read your resume, your talent was being buried, Julian said gently, gesturing toward his private office. Walk with me. Let's grab some coffee before the afternoon strategy meeting. Walking beside Julian, Edith felt a sense of light, unburdened freedom she hadn't experienced in a decade. When she first arrived in Worler, her abdominal wound was still healing, and her heart felt like a hollow shell. But the fast-paced, demanding environment of Worler Global gave her no time to wallow in old grief. Julian had recognized her intellect immediately. He gave her real responsibility, treated her as a valuable professional, and respected her boundaries completely. When she worked late, he didn't send her dramatic, needy text messages or expect her to cater to his emotional whims. He simply ordered dinner for the entire team, brought her a cup of hot black coffee and said, "Go home when you're tired, Edith. The work will still be here tomorrow." For the first time in her life, Edith realized what true respect looked like. It wasn't grand promises or theatrical displays of emotion. It was steady, reliable support. It was being seen, valued, and protected without having to beg for it. By the way, Julian said as he poured 2 cups of dark roast in his office, the National Tech and Investment Expo is holding its annual summit in Worler this weekend. As our lead product director, you'll be representing Worler Global at the VIP opening gala. Edith smiled, taking the porcelain cup. I'll have my team prepare the presentation decks. Get a nice dress, Edith, Julian added with a soft chuckle, his eyes warm. You've worked 18-hour days for 6 months. It's time to let the industry see the woman behind the algorithm. The grand ballroom of the Warler International Convention Center was illuminated by crystal chandeliers, filled with the soft music of a live string quartet and the quiet clinking of champagne flutes. Heston's corporate delegation had arrived that morning, led by Garner Enterprises, Wayne's family firm. Wayne stood near the edge of the main floor, wearing a dark tuxedo. In 6 months, he had lost nearly 20 pounds. His face was angular, his jaw sharp, his dark eyes shadowed by chronic insomnia. His company's stock had fluctuated wildly because his attention was entirely consumed by a desperate, relentless search for Edith. He had hired private investigators, pulled corporate registries, and checked aviation logs, but Edith had intentionally filed her relocation papers under an international privacy clause. Mr. Garner, his assistant whispered beside him, gesturing toward the main entrance staircase. The host company's executive team has arrived. That's Mr. Julian Vance, managing director of Warler Global. Wayne turned his head casually, preparing to offer a polite corporate greeting. Then his breath stopped. Walking down the grand marble staircase, her arm rested lightly on Julian Vance's tux-clad arm, was Edith. She wore an off-the-shoulder emerald green silk gown that hugged her slender, graceful waist. Her collarbones were defined, her skin radiant under the chandelier light, her eyes bright with composure and intelligence. She was laughing softly at something Julian said, her head tilted back, her posture radiating an effortless, magnetic beauty. Wayne's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. Clatter. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, sparkling wine splashing over his leather shoes. Nearby guests turned to look in surprise, but Wayne didn't notice them. His heart slammed against his ribs like a sledgehammer. Edith. She looked breathtaking. She looked radiant. She looked completely, utterly whole. There was no trace of the pale, frail, timid woman who used to sit by the window, waiting for him to come home. There was no shadow of pain in her eyes. She looked like a woman who had never been broken, or rather, a woman who had rebuilt herself into something entirely unbreakable. Without thinking, Wayne pushed past his assistant, stepping through the crowd of executives, his eyes fixed on her as if pulled by an invisible, desperate wire. Edith. He choked out. As if hearing his voice, Edith paused near the bottom of the staircase. Turned her head, her gaze drifting casually over the crowd until her eyes locked onto Wayne. Wayne's chest heaved. He waited for her reaction, waited for the anger, the tears, the hatred, the bitterness he knew he deserved. He prepared himself to drop to his knees right there on the ballroom floor, if it meant getting her to listen to him. But Edith didn't cry. She didn't glare. When her eyes met his, her expression remained entirely unchanged. It was a look of light, polite, completely detached indifference, the exact same way one looks at a passing stranger on a crowded subway platform. She gave him a tiny, courteous nod, turned her head smoothly back toward Julian, and continued walking toward the VIP lounge, her laugh echoing softly over the sound of the violins. Wayne stood rooted to the spot, feeling as if the room had been drained of all oxygen. She didn't hate him. Hate required feeling. Hate meant there was still an ember of passion left to burn. Edith had simply erased him. The gala ended at 11 in the evening. Cold autumn rain began to fall over Warler, slicking the wide concrete plaza. Outside the convention center, Edith walked out of the VIP glass doors, wrapped in a black cashmere coat over her green gown. Julian was standing near the curb, speaking with his driver about the evening's schedule. Edith. A harsh, desperate voice cut through the sound of the rain. Wayne surged forward from behind a marble pillar, ignoring the rain soaking his suit, his face pale and frantic. Julian's private bodyguards immediately stepped forward, blocking Wayne's path. But Edith raised a slender hand, signaling them to hold. It's fine, Edith said quietly. She walked forward, stopping 3 steps away from Wayne, sheltered beneath the large black umbrella held by a staff member. Wayne looked at her, his lips trembling, tears mixing with the rain streaming down his face. Edith, please. Just 5 minutes. I'm begging you. We have nothing to talk about, Wayne, Edith said. Her voice was serene, devoid of a single ripple of hostility. I know what happened. Wayne cried out, his voice cracking violently in the night air. I went to the hospital after you left. Dr. Harrison told me everything. I know about the perforation. I know how close you came to. He couldn't even bring himself to say the word. His chest heaved as he took a desperate step closer. I was a monster, Edith. I was blind, I was arrogant, I was sick. My hyper-empathy. I thought I was helping people, but I was just hurting the only woman who ever truly loved me. I cut Andrea off completely 3 months ago. I threw her out of the city. I haven't looked at another woman since the day you left. He reached into his breast pocket with shaking fingers, pulling out a small velvet box. He flipped it open. Inside sat a flawless 6-carat diamond ring, the ring Edith had once looked at. In a magazine 4 years ago, before Wayne told her that buying grand jewelry was too commercial and materialistic. I bought it for you, Wayne sobbed, dropping to his knees right there on the wet pavement, his hands lifting the box toward her. I brought the deeds to all my properties, the shares in Garner Enterprises, everything. I'll put it all in your name, Edith. I'll move to Warler. I'll resign from my company. Just let me stay by your side again. Let me make it up to you for the rest of my life. The rain poured down, splashing against the velvet box, soaking Wayne's knees in cold water. The surrounding security guards and guests watched in stunned silence as one of Heston's wealthiest corporate heirs begged on his knees like a street beggar. Edith looked down at him. She looked at the diamond ring sparkling beneath the rain. She looked at his tear-streaked face, his bloodshot eyes, his trembling hands. For 3 years, she had dreamed of this exact scene. She had imagined him, realizing his mistakes, weeping for her forgiveness, proving that she was his top priority. But standing here now, looking at the man kneeling in the rain, she felt nothing. No satisfaction. No bitterness. No triumphant joy. Only a profound, quiet sense of absurdity. Wayne, Edith said softly. Wayne looked up, his eyes filled with a terrifying, pathetic hope. Edith. Do you remember the night I was sitting in the ambulance? She asked, her voice carrying clearly over the patter of the rain. My stomach was torn open. The infection was spreading. I was clutching my phone, watching Instagram update. Wayne flinched as if struck by an arrow. I saw Andrea's photo, Edith continued calmly. I saw you carrying her medicine, smiling at her, bringing her to the hospital for a cold that didn't even require a tissue. And do you know what I realized in that moment? She stepped closer, looking directly into his sunken eyes. I realized that your hyper-empathy wasn't a condition, Wayne. It was a choice. Wayne froze. You felt everyone's pain, Edith whispered, except the pain of the woman who was dying right in front of you. Not because you couldn't, but because you knew I loved you enough to endure it. She took a step back, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. You didn't come to Warler because you love me, Wayne. You came because the woman who used to accept your cruelty silently is gone, and your pride can't handle being forgotten. No, Edith. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. Wayne shrieked, reaching out frantically to grab the hem of her gown. Edith stepped out of his reach. Keep your money, Wayne. Keep your diamond ring, she said softly. I earned my own life in Warler, and I don't need leftovers anymore. She turned around, took Julian's offered arm, and walked into the waiting sedan. The car door shut with a heavy, final click. Wayne lunged forward, his hands slamming against the dark-tinted window. Edith, please. Don't leave me, Edith. The sedan accelerated smoothly, pulling away into the rain-swept night, its red taillights shrinking into 2 tiny specks before vanishing entirely into the Warler fog. Wayne collapsed forward onto his hands and knees on the wet asphalt, clutching the velvet box against his mouth, letting out a raw, agonizing howl that drowned in the roar of the autumn storm. Back in Heston, the consequences of Wayne's neglect and madness reached their ultimate conclusion. 2 months after the summit in Warler, Andrea Graham sat in a cramped interrogation room at the Heston Municipal Police Station. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a dull gray jumpsuit. Her face was sallow, her hair limp. When Wayne had cut her off 3 months prior, Andrea refused to give up the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Desperate for money, she had attempted to blackmail one of Wayne's business partners using staged photos, claiming sexual harassment. The partner, however, didn't back down. He hired a top legal team and uncovered a trail of systemic fraud. Andrea had been fabricating medical receipts, faking family emergencies, and laundering money from the charitable foundation Wayne had established in her name. She was charged with extortion, financial fraud, and defamation. Mr. Garner. Andrea whimpered through the thick glass partition as Wayne sat across from her in the visitor's cell. Please help me. You used to care about me. You said I was fragile. You promised to take care of me. Wayne looked at her through the glass. His eyes were completely dead. His hyper-empathy, the curse he had once nursed, seemed to have burned out entirely, leaving behind an empty, frozen desert. I never cared about you, Andrea, Wayne said, his voice as flat as a tombstone. I just liked feeling like a savior. He stood up, picked up his trench coat, and walked out of the prison without turning back once. A year later, spring arrived in Warler. The coastal cherry blossoms bloomed along the promenade, floating on the soft sea breeze. On the top floor of Warler Global Tech's headquarters, a grand press conference was taking place. Edith Trevino stood at the podium, officially accepting her appointment as the Chief Executive Officer of Warler Global's new international division. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding chorus. Reporters raised their hands frantically, firing off questions about her rapid rise, her groundbreaking algorithms, and her future expansion plans. Among the crowd of journalists at the back of the auditorium stood a man in a plain gray coat, his hat pulled low over his eyes. It was Wayne. He had bought a small, modest apartment 3 miles from her office in Warler. He didn't approach her. He didn't call her. He didn't send flowers. He simply spent his days sitting in the back row of her public lectures, watching her from afar like a ghost clinging to a world he no longer belonged to. On the stage, a young female reporter raised her microphone. Dr. Trevino, your career trajectory over the past 18 months has been extraordinary. Many people wonder what drove you to leave Heston so suddenly and achieve such massive success here. Edith paused, her gaze sweeping over the audience. For a brief second, her eyes passed right over the gray-hatted man sitting in the back row, without stopping for even a fraction of a second. She looked into the camera, a soft, beautiful, completely serene smile gracing her lips. A few years ago, I thought love meant endurance, Edith said, her voice echoing clearly through the speakers. I thought if I stayed quiet enough, patient enough, and forgiving enough, someone would eventually see my value. She took a gentle breath, resting her hands confidently on the podium. Then I nearly died. And I realized that the greatest tragedy isn't being unloved by someone else, it's abandoning yourself to keep someone else warm. She raised her head, her eyes sparkling with vibrant, unyielding light. I left Heston not because I was running away from pain, but because I finally remembered who I was before I met him. And I will never let anyone make me shrink again. The auditorium erupted into thundering, deafening applause. In the back row, Wayne closed his eyes, tears slipping quietly beneath his hat, soaking into his collar. His hyper-empathy flared one final time, not with fake distress, not with manipulative sorrow, but with the pure, undeniable weight of Edith's complete, unshakable happiness. She was truly happy. She was thriving. She was loved by the world, by her work, and by a man who respected her strength. And in that absolute happiness, there was no place for Wayne Garner. He turned around slowly, pulled his collar up against the spring breeze and walked quietly out of the hall, disappearing forever into the bustling, indifferent streets of Warler.